November 13th, 2024, Washington, D.C. On November 13th at 11:30 a.m., the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Oversight and Accountability conducted a meeting. However, this would not be any ordinary meeting that you might think of. During this meeting, a variety of topics were discussed, and the most notable being the subject of the day's proceedings, UAPs, otherwise known as Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, and discussing the legitimacy of the United States' further interest in the phenomenon. This marks the second hearing of its kind in the past few years, with the first being the meeting held only a few years prior, where the United States government declassified numerous extremely compelling pieces of video evidence in regards to UAPs. In that first meeting, numerous claims were made, some of which we will discuss later on. But perhaps one of the most compelling pieces of evidence to come out of this congressional hearing was a claim from an unknown government whistleblower about a secret government access program that supposedly contains and manages highly classified information on the existence of UAPs, and that this program is unknown to Congress and is operating without congressional oversight. Today on Unblurring the Unknown, we dive into the results from that congressional hearing back on November 13th and dive into the plethora of evidence discussed and explore the legitimacy of the report of this secret program known as Immaculate Constellation. Welcome back to Unblurring the Unknown. As always, I am your host, Dominic, and I'm recording to you on this fine evening, drinking a beer, having a good time, and I am back to go over some recent news within the UFO, UAP, and conspiracy theory worlds with the recent congressional hearing that was just held in Washington, D.C. Now, some of you might have heard about the results from that hearing and some of the things that were discussed, and one of them being the disclosure of an unknown U.S. government worker saying that the U.S. government has a secret program operating without government oversight that contains highly classified data and evidence in regards to UFOs, and that this program has supposedly been in operation since 2017. Its name, Immaculate Constellation. Now, is this program real? That is what I want to find out. But in addition to that, I also want to share some of the crazy things that were shared during this meeting, and perhaps what the future holds for those of us that research these types of things, and even the future of UFOs from a government perspective. So where we are going to start today off with is a little bit of context from this congressional hearing that took place on November 13th. Now, in this congressional hearing, multiple topics were discussed. Testimonies were provided from everything in regards to whether or not the government possessed alien craft, to that the U.S. servicemen and women had been injured in recovering debris from UFO crash sites, and even that some UFOs come out of a base in the ocean. Now, that last claim I'm not fully sure if I'm sold on yet. Now, this hearing in particular, the one just recently on November 13th, is coming over a year after the highly controversial and mind-boggling testimony from a U.S. intelligence official named David Grush. Now, many people within the UFO communities probably knew this hearing happened, and I remember hearing about it when it first went public, and I actually listened to a couple other podcasts on the topic as well to listen kind of what was stated back in this meeting in July of 2023, when this David Grush individual went public with what he knew. In that hearing, Grush stated under oath to Congress that he was running a UAP analysis within kind of this UAP analysis program within the Department of Defense. He stated that his role within the government was being tasked with looking into what the military, defense agencies, and other government organizations knew about alien crafts, and stated to the hearing that he was barred from accessing top secret UAP-based information. He had stated that he knew of people who were harmed and injured in the course of the government trying to keep UFO information secret. He also stated that the government was secretly hiding alien craft, and that quote-unquote non-humans had been found by the U.S. government, and they were being kept top secret. Grush would continue and state that this entire effort by the U.S. government had been going on for many decades, and that part of this program he was part of, or at least slightly in the loop on, was also to reverse engineer found alien technology for the government's benefit, or so he claims. Now, of course, some of Grush's claims have been met with speculation, However, it marked a monumental stride for mainstream recognition of UAP research, in the idea that a much broader conspiracy is happening within our own government. But, for now, let's fast forward back to the present day. Present during the November 13th, 2024 hearing was numerous witnesses who provided testimonials. Them being the following, and if I do butcher any of these names, I do apologize. Now, the first one would be Dr. Tim Gallaudet, who was a retired Rear Admiral from the U.S. Navy. He is also currently the CEO of Ocean STL Consulting, LLC, which is a marine technology and consulting firm. Also present was Luis Elizondo, former Department of Defense official and author, who has been very mainstream as of the past several years from his departure from the U.S. government. Now, I will go into him a little bit more here in just a second. Also in attendance was Michael Gold, former NASA Associate Administrator of Space Policy and Partnerships, member of the NASA UAP Independent Study Team, and lastly, present was Michael Schellenberger, author and founder of the journalist site Public, a subsidiary of Substack, and also serves as chair/professor at the University of Austin under politics, censorship, and free speech. Now, the most compelling of these witnesses, or that provided testimonials, is firstly Michael Schellenberger. For him, this idea in this story of Immaculate Constellation comes from, but also Luis Elizondo. Now, the idea of Immaculate Constellation, Michael Schellenberger was the first one to report on Immaculate Constellation from this government whistleblower who reportedly approached him. But before we do that, let me talk about Luis Elizondo, because that name, if you have done any research into UFOs, like I have, you probably can't throw a rock around anything related to UFO content without hearing the name of Luis, aka Lou Elizondo. Now, what makes Luis Elizondo a very compelling individual is his previous ties with obviously the US government and obviously UAP research within the government. Now, he is also a very accomplished author in the UFO field, but also provides a world of background and experience when it comes to UFO investigating and campaigning for better transparency when it comes to communicating to the people from the government about the threats that UAPs could pose to national security. Now, according to his official website and bio, Luis Elizondo grew up in South Florida as a son of a Cuban immigrant father who was exiled from the country during Fidel Castro's regime. As he grew up, he would attend the University of Miami, where he earned double majors in microbiology and immunology and minors in chemistry and mathematics. He also gained advanced research experience into infectious diseases and parasitology. During his research in college, he was exposed greatly to working with the U.S. government, and because of that, he gained the desire to serve his country. So, after he graduated college, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. After serving a couple tours with the Army, one in the States and one over in South Korea, he got recruited to be a civilian intel officer and special agent in 1998. After the events of 9/11, he was deployed to Afghanistan and served multiple tours while being an operations officer and battle captain, while focusing on counterintelligence. In 2003, he was back in the United States, overseeing counter-espionage and counterterrorism for the U.S. government. He would go on to serve in the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive, in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and become a senior official within the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, also known as ATIP, which was the Pentagon's secret group that studied UFOs and the threat they posed. In October of 2017, Luis Elizondo resigned from his post at the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program and took his knowledge of UFOs and UAPs public and started raising awareness for the greater understanding of the field and threat these objects pose to the country. Now, the reason I mention Luis in particular is that throughout this hearing, they ask him and drill him with a bunch of different questions, most of these questions being very heavy hitters. Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina headed up the hearing committee and asked Elizondo a series of questions. Now, Elizondo previously this year in a memoir claimed that the U.S. government had recovered and was in possession of UFO crafts. Representative Mace asked Elizondo, and I quote, "Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs? Yes or no?" Elizondo stated under oath, yes. Representative Mace then asked Elizondo, and I quote, "Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft? Yes or no?" Elizondo stated yes. Lastly, Representative Mace stated, and I quote, "In your book, you mentioned government employees who have been injured by UAPs placed on leave and receiving government compensation for their injuries. Is that correct?" Elizondo also stated this was correct. Of course, on the surface, this would all be taken with a grain of salt. However, lying under oath is considered perjury and is a crime. So the fact that he states all of these things and stands by them, there has to be some merit to his statements. And anyone's statements within that room, you would have to imagine that anybody who makes any comment under oath or during this hearing, that they are telling the truth. Again, people have lied under oath before, and that is not unheard of, but this kind of adds to the idea that why would these people who are testifying about UFOs and UAPs lie under oath, lie in the first place? But of course, we'll circle back to that idea later on in theories. Now, Luis wasn't the only one in the room who made some claims. Michael Schellenberger, like I mentioned, was the reporter in which the Immaculate Constellation story comes from, had also had his fair share of questions asked his way about the whistleblower that approached him with this story of the secret government program. Now, believe it or not, in Representative Nancy Mace's personal website, it actually holds the entire manuscript and summary of the hearings, and in this 11-page document, it details the idea behind Immaculate Constellation in its entirety. And including that, it also goes through numerous sightings that the U.S. government has collected through different forms of imagery intelligence. It also goes over the various forms and shapes that UFOs have been sighted as well. Now, I do want to go over the document's recap of Immaculate Constellation as well as these sightings from the U.S. government's archives from these various imagery sources from these multiple different government programs. Now, I do recommend anybody who is interested in looking into this story further reads this entire document for themselves. And the fact that this document was even posted online, I'm honestly really surprised about, because it has so much information on it. And so much really good information, and all these sightings, and all these imagery reports, and everything about Immaculate Constellation is really, really cool, and I'm shocked that it's on the internet. But I guess that goes to show you the strides that have been made in recent years towards, I guess, the acknowledgement of UAPs and the idea that we need to study them. Now, the first part I want to read of this document is, of course, the part that talks about Immaculate Constellation. Now, this document we'll read in the following, and it is quite long, so I do apologize for that, but I do want to read it in its entirety because I do think it's very, very important. This document reads the following. Section 1. Unacknowledged Special Access Program, Immaculate Constellation. Immaculate Constellation is an unacknowledged special access program established following the public disclosure of the ATIP AAWSAP programs by Luis Elizondo in 2017. Upon disclosure to Congress, it was determined that this USAP and its collateral information have not been lawfully reported to Congress. Now, that previous statement I just said is underlined, so I don't know if that holds extra intelligence, but it is underlined, so I think that that's kind of the point that she wants to get across, that, hey, we don't know that this exists. However, the document continues. Immaculate Constellation's primary mission is collecting intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, and ARV/RV reproduction vehicles, that's the abbreviation RV, reproduction vehicles, utilizing tasked and untasked U.S. military intelligence resources as part of a network of SAPs linked to non-human intelligence and UAP technologies. Immaculate Constellation acts as a nexus for collecting, analyzing, and disseminating intelligence on the activities, capabilities, and locations of anomalous aerospace threats that originate from foreign or unidentified sources. The intelligence within the Immaculate Constellation program consists primarily of high-quality imagery intelligence, also known as IMINT, and collateral measurement and signatures intelligence, MASINT, of UAPs and RVs within Earth's atmosphere. The collection platforms involved are a blend of tasked and untasked capabilities in low Earth orbit, LEO, the upper atmosphere, military and civilian aviation altitudes, and maritime environments. Immaculate Constellation pays particular attention to anomalous aerospace platforms that have been developed through the study or acquisition of technologies of unknown origin by foreign nations or unknown entities. UAP and ARV-RV signatures in preferred operating areas are known to the program, enabling a degree of strategic awareness and warning. Finally, Immaculate Constellation shows that UAP and ARV/RVs are operating around the globe, often in close proximity to sensitive foreign assets and locations. The categorization of Immaculate Constellation as a parent USAP with various child SAPs under its umbrella indicates a high level of compartmentalization and secrecy. In effect, Immaculate Constellation serves as a central or parent USAP that consolidates observations of UAP and ARV activities detected by tasked and untasked collection platforms. Sophisticated internal information security controls are a major part of Immaculate Constellation program, which enforces compartmentalization by detecting, quarantining, and transferring UAP and RV imagery collection incidents before they are circulated within the military intelligence enterprise. In conclusion, Immaculate Constellation shows that the U.S. government, is not only aware of UAPs and TUO, but also foreign state efforts to replicate UAP and TUO capabilities. The data within Immaculate Constellation reveals the capacity of the U.S. Armed Services and military intelligence community to detect, track, identify, and engage anomalous transmedium platforms. Immaculate Constellation also demonstrates the extant capability to detect, quarantine, and transfer UAP and RV collection incidents before they are observed and circulated within the military intelligence enterprise, partially explaining why many otherwise cleared members of the military and IC are unaware of UAP activities. Finally, the existence of Immaculate Constellation provides verifiable evidence of the witting participation by elements of the U.S. Armed Services, Defense Civil Service, and the intelligence community in a global surveillance and reconnaissance mission tasked with monitoring UAPs and ARV/RVs. Phew, that was a lot. Now, again, that was a lot all at once, and I do apologize. However, in summary, what this document is saying is that Immaculate Constellation is collecting and housing all of this classified UFO data and is parenting numerous other smaller groups whose job, I have to assume, is to analyze this data and investigate the validity of it. Now, on the surface, this might not be as compelling of a whistleblower story as David Grush's that he came out with last year, but it still goes to show the U.S. government is probably as secretive about UFOs as they were back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Obviously, in the last episode that we just did, the Coin helicopter incident, we dived very briefly into how the U.S. government was secretly investigating UFO reports and how it was classified. The difference between then and now is that the U.S. government is starting to offer us little tidbits of what a lot of us who kind of do this as research already knew. Now, we already knew that the U.S. government was investigating these craft and that they had programs, such as Immaculate Constellation, for example, that are collecting data that could possibly prove to the entire world that alien life exists and comes in the shape of UFOs and UAPs, and even possibility of biologics or bodies of aliens being recovered. Now, always kind of look at it, and I've always looked at it through the lens of that the government is for sure not telling the full story, and that they never tell us, the citizens, the full story. And if they feel comfortable releasing things to the public, these things that they say, hey, we feel comfortable releasing these videos of unidentified craft, and we're going to say they're unidentified and we don't know what they are. To me, that shows possibly what they have locked away from human eyes is quite possibly beyond comprehension to us in our minds and how our minds work. Is that if they're finally comfortable with saying, hey, we are seeing things that we can't fully explain, but we're going to tell everybody we're seeing things that we can't fully explain, what do they truly have stowed away in a hangar or underground somewhere that we probably have no idea of? It kind of makes my brain think sometimes. And maybe I think too hard about it. but it's certainly very interesting to think about. Now that we have talked about Immaculate Constellation, let's talk about some sightings that are listed in this same document about imagery intelligence collected by the US government. And it actually has its own section. And I'm going to read this section in its entirety right now because there are some very, very compelling sightings in this document. Section 2, USG Imagery Intelligence. The USG, aka US government, maintains imagery intelligence, also known as IMINT, databases accessible to personnel with appropriate security clearances and mission need. These databases are scattered across various organizations and services, leading to a fragmented ownership structure. This dispersion complicated the timely and comprehensive gathering of IMINT, related to unidentified aerial phenomena. Control over access to these databases primarily reside within the military intelligence enterprise, the combatant commands, the armed services, and individual program managers. The IMINT collected from datasets available to the DoD and reviewed for this report provide compelling evidence for UAP, which defy prosaic explanations. There was a large number of unique imagery sensors available to the US military and intelligence community, including infrared, forward-looking infrared, also known as FLIR, full motion video, also known as FMV, thermal, and still photography. The multitude of different wavelengths collected by these sensors have captured UAP characteristics that are difficult or impossible to observe with the human eye alone. Subtle atmospheric effects associated with UAPs are visible through the sensors employed by the US military and intelligence agencies, enabling unique analytic techniques. The verifiable chain of custody for UAP IMINT collected by US military assets ensures a high level of confidence in the accuracy and integrity of the data gathered. The following examples are presented. Now, as I work through this, a lot of this is kind of word salad, and for that I do apologize. But let me get into the sightings that are provided in this document. Now, the first one being CENTCOM cuboid formation of metallic orbs. On USG networks, there exists daytime FMV and daytime FLIR footage of a formation of 12 metallic orbs skimming the ocean surface at high speed before dispersing in multiple directions. The rapid and agile maneuvering of the metallic orbs were incompatible with known aerospace vehicles and were between 3 to 6 meters in diameter. In the opening segment of this footage, the 12 metallic orbs flew in a tight cuboid formation. The metallic orbs were in 3 vertical square formations of 4 orbs each, arranged in a 3-pronged configuration, creating the illusion of a cube shape at distance. All of the orbs were white hot against the black, cold ocean in the FLIR footage, and each spear created a faint atmospheric distortion both around itself and as a heat shimmer contrail. The metallic orbs moved in this cube formation over the ocean for some time before rapidly breaking formation as pairs. The sensor platform lost track of most of the metallic orbs as they ascended in altitude and accelerated in speed, but maintained observation on a pair of metallic orbs, continuing the original trajectory of the larger formation. Now, let's move into the second sighting that is provided in this report. CENTCOM fast mover observed transiting over sensitive facilities. On USG networks, there exists FLIR footage of a small medium oval UAP flying at high speed and low to the surface. The footage begins as routine surveillance of a sensitive coastal facility when the oval UAP rapidly comes into frame as it flies above coastal facilities. The oval UAP then makes a rapid turn towards the ocean, where it is tracked by the collection platform. The oval UAP is tracked flying low over the open ocean at high speed before the track is lost. Now let's move into the third sighting that is provided in this report. Indopacom intelligence vessels positioned to collect on reproduction vehicle. On USG networks, there exists infrared footage of and imagery of a grouping of vessels engaged in SIGINT and MASSINT collection at night in a specific area of the Pacific Ocean. In this footage, which was in close proximity to the vessels, a large equilateral triangle UAP suddenly appears directly over the ships. 3 bright points are seen at each bottom corner of the UAP, which is observed to slightly rotate on its horizontal axis. This rotation partially reveals a horizontal bar of sweeping lights. Intelligence analysis associated with this event specifies that the equilateral triangle is a reproduction vehicle, RV, and concludes that the vessels must have been aware of the RV's frequent use of those coordinates. Due to the foreign prepositioning of advanced collection assets at the exact time and place, after a brief period of hovering and slowly rotating, approximately 500 to 1,000 meters above the ocean, the RV suddenly disappears, and the footage ends. Now let's get into the fourth sighting, fourth. Sorry, I got lost track there for a second. The fourth sighting that is provided in this document. Indopacom Equilateral Triangle UAP tails unwitting vessel. On USG networks, there exists infrared footage of an equilateral triangle UAP, approximately fighter jet sized, hovering less than 200 meters above vessel, in the night at a location in the Pacific. Intelligence analysis associated with this event specifies that the equilateral triangle is an ARV-RV of unknown origin. The vessel gives no signs that it is aware of the ARV-RV maintaining altitude and bearing directly overhead. 2 lights on the underside of the ARV/RV are visible, while a third is blocked from view due to a slightly upward angle of orientation. Now let's get into the fifth sighting. Indopacom large disk using clouds as concealment. On USG networks, there exists OPIR footage of a large saucer-shaped UAP emerging from within a dense cloud formation. The saucer registered black hot against the white cold, with an atmospheric disturbances caused by the saucer-shaped UAP visible. The saucer was between 200 and 400 meters in circumference and displayed symmetrical concavities on the upper surface. The saucer-shaped UAP emerges at a shallow angle, traveling upwards towards the outer atmosphere. After breaking above the cloud cover, the saucer-shaped UAP suddenly reverses its direction, descending partially back into the cloud cover, then accelerating rapidly out of frame and partially obscured by the cloud tops. This behavior was evasive in nature and implied that the saucer-shaped UAP had become aware that it was under observation by a space-based collection platform. Now let's get into the sixth sighting. Indopacom Boomerang UAP observed by pilot in sensor suite. On USG networks, there exists FLIR footage of a swept Boomerang UAP maneuvering at an uncertain altitude at a location off the eastern coast of a country. The UAP is tracked against clouds by the sensor suite of the operating craft. The UAP is observed rapidly decelerating to a stationary hover, followed by the sudden emission of a spear of light from the junction of the 2 wings, which expands to partially engulf the craft in a rotating sphere of light, at which point the available footage ends. Now, the seventh sighting mentioned in this report. Northcom Jellyfish UAP crosses U.S.-Mexico border. On USG networks, there exists FLIR footage of an irregular-shaped UAP flying across the southern border. The UAP appeared in FLIR footage to be modeled irregularly with hot-cold emissions and approximated a jellyfish or floating brain with hanging appendages in appearance. The UAP flew against the wind with no visible means of propulsion, maintained an unnatural rigidity in its movements and flight path, and maintained a comparatively low altitude to geographical features. In appearance and behavior, footage of this UAP violating the airspace of the southern border resembled the same class of UAPs observed near DoD facilities in Iraq and Afghanistan. There exists at least one compilation video of this class of UAP sourced from DoD Force Protection Assets in Theater ISR, which uses this footage as a point of comparison. Now, the eighth sighting in this report. Northcom Supersonic Range Fowler intercepts USN fighter. On USG networks, there exists FLIR footage and radar data of a supersonic UAP of uncertain characteristics conducting a head-on intercept of a USN fighter operating off the eastern seaboard. The UAP is observed emerging from a cloud bank at a high speed and approaching the USN aircraft head-on, rapidly passing over the left side of the cockpit. Radar data from this approach tracks the UAP on its approach towards the craft, providing information on speed, heading, and elevation. Now, the 9th sighting, and final one, provided in this report. Southcom Tic Tac detected by space asset in proximity of vessel. On USG networks, there exists OPIR imagery and massent of a Tic Tac UAP transiting through an area of the Atlantic Ocean. The Tic Tac maneuvers at an altitude at or near local cloud cover, and correlated electromagnetic signatures were collected by massent. In the available footage, the Tic Tac UAP transits rapidly through the field of regard as it transits the ocean. No observed reaction is seen to come from the vessel, but its proximity in time and space to the trajectory of this UAP suggest foreknowledge of the UAP event by intelligence. Now, again, very, very long, and I do apologize again. That was a lot of talking. My throat's a little dry, but it is what it is. Now, there are another section of this document that will go on to list the most common sizes and shapes of UFOs and UAPs that are collected from 1991 to 2022, and the speed in which they were reported to travel and other behaviors that were reported due to the shape of the UAPs in question. So it's like a big table that pretty much maps out everything about, like, okay, if this UAP is a triangle, it roughly moves on average at this speed. It looks like this. Its rough size is this. These are the lights reported on it. It details all of this. And again, I thoroughly recommend anybody who is interested in looking into Immaculate Constellation, and most important, this hearing in particular, I definitely recommend that you check out this entire document. Read it for yourself. It is probably the most comprehensive document, or at least one of the most comprehensive document that I have seen in regards to UFOs that has been released by the government, I think, ever, or at least pretty close to it. Now, there are, in this document as well, 3 examples of human service member reports and sightings on UAPs, and there's 3 of them, like I said, and I will list these 3 for you as well. And I'm going to read directly from this document as well. Examples of defense human, so human intelligence sightings, reports on UAP. Close encounter by CVN flight deck personnel. While on active duty in the Pacific, flight deck personnel working night duty experienced a close encounter with a spherical UAP of medium-large size. On-duty flight deck crew observed a small orange-red sphere maneuvering at medium-high altitude above the CVN. Shortly after first observation, the UAP rapidly descended from high altitude to a position directly above the flight deck of the CVN, height approximately 100 to 200 yards. The UAP maintained altitude and matched speed with the underway CVN for an uncertain period. Observing personnel reported altered perceptions of time during the close encounter. The UAPs appeared to emit a soft orange-red light, which bizarrely did not illuminate the ocean or the flight deck of the CVN, despite the visual appearance of intense luminosity. The surface of the UAP was observed to be dynamic, rolling like the surface of the sun. The UAP took no reported actions during the encounter, only maintaining a close-in proximity to the CVN. After an uncertain period, the UAP suddenly shot into the air, disappearing at a point high above the CVN. Observing personnel felt as if they snapped out of a trance and sense of profound unease. The incident report concludes with noting that the CVN had not responded in any way to what was perceived as a hostile interception by the UAP. Now, here is the second human report that is listed in this report. Metallic orbs intercept F-22 on CONUS air surveillance and control mission. While performing a routine airspace surveillance and control mission in the Eastern Air Defense Sector, an F-22 fighter observed multiple UAP contacts at mission altitude. Moving to intercept, the F-22 pilot noted multiple metallic orbs, slightly smaller than a sedan, which, I don't mean to sidetrack, that's still pretty big. So I love that it's like slightly smaller than a sedan. That's That's pretty big. Hovering in place. Upon vectoring towards the UAPs, a smaller formation of the metallic orbs accelerated at rapid speed towards the F-22, which was unable to establish radar locks on the presumed hostile UAPs. The F-22 broke trajectory and attempted to evade, but was intercepted and boxed in by approximately 3 to 6 UAPs. One UAP maneuvered in proximity, roughly 12 meters, to the area directly starboard of the cockpit. There, the UAP established a rigid spatial relationship with the F-22, maintaining its exact position and orientation parallel with the F-22's cockpit, despite multiple evasive rolls and maneuvers. Surrounded by the presumed hostile UAPs, the F-22 was forced out of the mission area under the escort of the UAP formation. And the last human intelligence report that is listed in this report. Perimeter of sensitive facility breached by UAP. At a military airfield located on the eastern seaboard, ground personnel reported a lengthy, low-altitude intrusion late at night by a small, spherical UAP. The UAP displayed visual signature management, appearing as a blurry sphere around which light was distorted or bent. This effect emanated outwards from the central sphere, giving the appearance of a heat haze or misty volume of distorted light. Ground personnel reported eye strain, headaches, and a feeling of unease or dread while observing this dark sphere. The UAP was first observed while slowly crossing the runway, moving in the direction of a sensitive area. Once across, the UAP hovered above the grouping of ground equipment before floating further towards a building within the sensitive area. The UAP then floated the building before suddenly disappearing. Ground personnel were uncertain of the length of the encounter, but estimated their observation lasted between 10 to 15 minutes. Now, let me recap all of these reports that we just talked about. These are some of the most comprehensive reports that I've ever read. And it kind of goes to show you that the U.S. government does not play around when it reports these types of things. So we can only imagine the types of reports that the U.S. government has had that they aren't telling us about. Imagine the type of crazy shit the U.S. government has seen that they're not telling us, but they're willing to put this in a document. Some of these sightings are insane. Some of these sightings are some of the most comprehensive UFO reports that I have read. And again, maybe I've read a very small sample size. And maybe I've only reported on very few of them in the grand scheme of things on this show. But these are some of the best UFO reports that I've read. I know I keep repeating myself, but I genuinely mean it. Maybe perhaps we take all of these accounts with a grain of salt. But the fact that they're being openly discussed in a government setting means we are on the right track when it comes to government exposure to these types of sightings and possible organizations that could be operating within the shadows of the government, and the type of information they could be hiding from the American public. So with all of this being said, with all of these reports discussed in this November 13th hearing, and I left those all with you for you to think about, stew on, formulate your own opinions, let's actually backtrack a little bit to Immaculate Constellation in particular and kind of talk theories about this. Because, of course, there's not really any theories about the sightings that were discussed within the November 13th hearings, but there is theories about Immaculate Constellation and whether or not Immaculate Constellation is real. So let's talk about that. The first theory that I have is real program shrouded in secrecy. And again, this is exactly as it sounds, and that the U.S. government, and in particular Immaculate Constellation, has evidence to prove the existence of UAPs, and even possibly maybe they have alien bodies or have recovered crash debris. Of course, when it comes to crash debris, the idea of the U.S. government having crash debris is not new. We have the claims about them recovering a craft in Roswell after the infamous incident there, and even having something lesser known that David Grush actually talked about last year, and that during World War II, the U.S. government had seized an alien craft from Italy that supposedly crashed all the way back in 1933 and was a bell-like shape. The U.S. forces, or as Grush states, the U.S. forces seized the bell, or the bell-like craft, I guess, during World War II and brought it back to the United States, and where the U.S. government still has possession of it and has possession of this crash debris of what's left, or so Grush claims. Do I think that all of those statements are plausible? Yes. Do I think the U.S. government has crash debris from UAPs or UFOs? Absolutely. We've gone this long. They have to have something. Whether or not you talk bodies and things like that, whether the U.S. government has bodies, that part I'm 50-50 on. You can kind of sway me either way on whether or not they could or they couldn't. But when it comes to crash debris and things of that nature, the U.S. government absolutely has that. And they are absolutely using what they have to reverse engineer for government purposes and for warfare applications. They absolutely are. You cannot sit there and tell me that the U.S. government has not taken foreign material from these UAPs that have crashed and have tried to reverse engineer it for military applications. Because we live in a world now that's probably more volatile than ever. Heck, we just shot American-made missiles into Russia a few weeks ago. We're a world where there is constant advancement in the military fields. You cannot sit there and tell me that if you had some alien technology that you would not try and use it to benefit you or benefit the country or benefit the military applications of said country. Again, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but you can kind of understand my point. Now, the second theory I want to talk about is that this is fake. Now, that the whistleblower that had talked to Michael Schellenberger is lying or making a bigger deal about this than it actually is. Now, this doesn't make sense on the surface, unless this was a story that maybe Michael Schellenberger made up for his own public publicity. Because since this hearing came out, since the idea of Immaculate Constellation has come out, this has set the UFO world ablaze. But I always backtrack to the idea that they all testified under oath, and lying under oath is a crime. So I'm kind of doubtful about them lying. Of course, people have exaggerated their claims under oath and things like that. So again, you can pick either side with this. But I'm doubtful as to think that they're lying, because everyone on this panel testified and believed in what they know and believed of what they have seen and what they've kind of been convinced to believe. And I think it's impossible to not think that the U.S. government knows something that we don't and has at least something tangible from UAPs and UFOs, and they are trying to reverse engineer it like I had just mentioned. I think that is 110% going on, and I think the idea is that we are probably never, ever going to know about the U.S. military taking these crashes or these parts from UAPs and trying to reverse engineer it. We are never, ever going to know about that. And I don't think we ever, like I said, we're never going to know about that. When it comes to Immaculate Constellation, do I think that there is a program out there that is compiling all of this data and all of this evidence and analyzing it and doing this? Absolutely. There is no shred of evidence in my mind. We went over all these reports in this document. We have not heard of any of these reports, or at least to my knowledge, until this whole report came out, until this hearing. We had not heard about any of these reports because the U.S. government doesn't openly say, hey, we saw unexplained lights in the sky. We saw flashing lights. We saw metallic orbs. We saw triangles. We saw tic-tacs. We saw boomerangs in the sky. They're not going to come out and say that. They're never going to come out and say that. But you guarantee that they are taking these sightings seriously and that they are taking this information and they are compiling it, they are doing statistics, they are running analytics of it, and it does not surprise me at all that this program is operating without congressional oversight. Because there is probably some information stashed within this Immaculate Constellation program that they don't want to show Congress, that they don't want to show the U.S. government, that they don't want to show the American people. There is not a shred of doubt in my mind, and this is probably the most certain that I have ever felt when it comes to a theory in any of the episodes, in the 58, 59 episodes that I have recorded. This is probably the most strongly that I have felt about any particular theory, and that is that Immaculate Constellation, without a shred of a doubt, or at least something like it, exists, and that it is real. And I am not backtracking on that. You can, of course, leave your personal thoughts and your personal theories in the comment sections below on this video, and feel free to tell me that. Feel free to tell me that I'm wrong. Feel free to tell me all these other things about me. Again, maybe disagree with me. You can disagree with me. Tell me if you liked it. Tell me if you agree with me. I'm open to all that. I try and respond to as many comments as I possibly can, and I do read them. I do read my comments. But with this all being said, that is going to do it on today's episode of Immaculate Constellation, and I hope you all enjoyed it again. Also touching on the November 13th hearings and all the sightings that were reported in this report that were discussed during this meeting. Very, very fun one. A lot of research, digging through kind of that whole government report and everything like that, and trying to give you just, again, the most comprehensive evidence that I could, being a one-person team, and just trying to give you all the facts that I can. But again, with that being said, this is the time of the episode where I do all my obligatory plugs here at the end. If you are listening to this on Spotify, please turn on post notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode. If you're listening to this on YouTube, if you're one of the, at this point, I have one video with 1,000 views, which I can't be on to say how grateful I am for that, and I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. It is just, the love and support has been great, and again, hope to keep expanding, hope to keep growing this show that is Unblurring the Unknown, and I'm having all sorts of fun in the world, and sometimes it's stressful, sometimes it's overwhelming, but I enjoy doing this. I enjoy talking to you all this week, even though I'm not talking to you face to face. I enjoy talking to you every single week. But if you're listening to this on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. Helps me get in the algorithm. I need to get in the algorithm, please. I'm begging you. I'm just kidding, but it greatly helps me out, and I do appreciate it. Please feel free to send me topic suggestions to my email on blurringtheunknown@gmail.com, or through Instagram direct message. I do a topic suggestions, and I'll probably be putting out a topic suggestion reminder on my Instagram as well, reminding you all that I do take topic suggestions, and please send them over to me. I do quite a few of them, and I try to be as engaged with them as I possibly can. But I'm also on TikTok, and I'm Blurring the Unknown. Check me out there, and with that all being said, that is going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed this episode on Immaculate Constellation and the November 13th UFO hearings. And I will see you all on the very next episode. Perhaps I will take a brief break from UFOs. 2 weeks back to back on UFOs is really leaving your guys saturated with all this UFO and alien talk. So maybe I'll switch it up next week. Actually, there's probably no shadow of a doubt that I'm going to switch it up next week. But with all that being said, again, thank you for the support. Thank you for the love. I greatly appreciate it. And I will see you all on the next one.